consciousness,
Okay.
and some of them are fairly new. They're not all initiated.
Okay, fair enough. Is it okay for me to share my screen?
Yes.
Please do.
Okay, let me see. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right, let's see. Can you see my screen? So basically this Maha-Mantra meditation and the brain. Some of you have seen this before, so if you have, my apologies. It may be a little bit redundant. But I currently work as a stroke neurologist with the VA National Telestroke program with the VA hospital. So that's about 80, I think, hospitals across the nation. General qualified neurology with special qualification in child neurology, which means really nothing. And then Preeti is my partner in life, and I'm in this study, and her name is Padmakshi Sri Devi Dasi, and she helped me with my research, which started at Henry Ford. Basically, before going in, I just want to have any disclosures. I practice Maha-Mantra meditation myself, and then I work with Jagannath Health LLC, which is invited and involved in working with people who have substance abuse issues and whatnot, and we're working with delivering Maha-Mantra meditation in this way. But taking a step back, just wanting to give some acknowledgements to, obviously, Srila Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, Gopal Krishna Goswami, and Mother Nidra, who's my Shiksha Guru since 21 days of age. And then all of the wonderful people that have helped us along the way. We have definitely aren't the brains behind this, so we're just, I think, blessed, and we need the blessings of those people who've those Vaishnavas who really just have good thoughts about us and are pushing this forward in this thoughts and their thoughts and really helping us. I just want to start off with, this is Mother Nidra, and Giriraj Swami, of course, and Gopal Krishna Goswami, and His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, and Bhakti Marg Swami. So a lot of mentors that started off in this, but it's interesting. You had asked Sarvabhauma Prabhu for me to talk about some people that have been very significant in my life. So Mother Nidra is the one who sort of introduced me to Krishna consciousness, but she's very, she's very careful as far as introducing it and pushing it very directly. But then I think there's some people that you know in the community, Shamsundar Prabhu, of course, and Chaitanya Prabhu and his wonderful wife, and Mataji, and of course the Tamal Krishna Goswami, who I never knew. But I must say that he had probably one of the most significant impacts in my life, especially in Krishna consciousness, because I watched his video one night of gods, demigods, and gods, demigods, and incarnations. And this was a phenomenal video for me, because at that time, I had thought that $10,000 was an incredibly lot of money. And there was a bet that he had. He said that if you, in his video, he said that if your life doesn't change after 30 days of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra, then I'll give you $10,000. And I was like, you're on, right? And nobody else had challenged me, actually. Mother Nidra, had mentioned it very subtly that, you should probably use the holy name. It's a very good idea, and it's very nurturing. But, the Tamal Krishna Goswami has sort of this presence, and I could feel this presence watching this in Galveston. And like, maybe I'll give this a try, and the $10,000 sounded really good too. So I gave it a try, and I lost the bet for sure, because he's absolutely right. It was absolutely life-changing, and it was so precious. And after going to this, I just want to take a step back. Back in 20, I think it's maybe 1998, I had a chance. I was studying for Berkeley Review in Berkeley, California, and they were filming this film called Patch Adams outside of the Berkeley Review. And I met Robin Williams and had about a half an hour conversation with him. And then I also met this gentleman to the right who stayed at my place. He said, look, I don't have a place to stay. And he said, I don't have a place to stay. Can I stay over at your place? And I was like, sure. And he was right there with Robin Williams. And I was like, sure, that's no problem. Like, you can stay at my place. I'm just studying for my exam, and sounded like a really, really nice guy. And he stayed over my place, and I had no idea who he was. And there's a movie called Patch Adams, which is about a doctor, and the doctor helps children and whatnot. It's one of those movies. And I realized that I spent half an hour with him, and then half an hour with this guy with Philip Seymour Hopkins, who stayed at my place, and I never really knew who he was until about a year later. He had said that, look, I'm just an extra, but he was actually the chief antagonist in this movie, which is a very popular movie. Of course, everybody knows Robin Williams, and then everybody knows, a lot of people know Philip Seymour Hopkins, but later on in life, I realized that Robin Williams, of course, had an abrupt end to his life, secondary to suicidal ideation and suicide, and secondary to neurological disease. And what I didn't realize until just a few days ago, is I was like, hey, whatever happened to Philip Seymour Hopkins? And I realized that he had passed away in a drug overdose in New York in 2014. I had no idea. I really don't keep up with this as much as I probably should. And I just realized that, man, I had an opportunity at that time. And I had an opportunity, and I didn't take the opportunity of just giving them a couple of names. And I think, especially since this audience is of esteemed devotees, it's so important, so incredibly important, because happiness is a currency that's based upon certain spiritual fundamentals that were taught from a very early age, and you sort of take this for granted. And the fact that devotees able to make a change in a life of somebody, I feel like I've missed these two chances in my life. And so forever I'll feel that, man, I really didn't take advantage of those two moments to give out the holy name. So I think there's two take-home points. Number one is Nitai Gorango, which is very important, is be able to deliver it at the right time, at the right place, and to all those who are around you. And number two is that what I want you to remember from this talk is that the nucleus accumbens is activated with Maha-Mantra meditation. And this is something that we've actually found out in our study at Henry Ford. So these are sort of the two take-home points. So if you get bored from the talk, here it is. These are sort of what I wanted to take home. And I think if there's a third point, it's people with this knowledge are so precious. They're so incredibly precious, and just really, really thankful to be in a community that knows how to capitalize on happiness within the heart, because a lot of people have no idea, and this is a skill, and it needs to be learned. And somebody who's giving this skill out, oftentimes it's just completely free of charge, and nobody wants anything else other than for somebody to be able to imbibe it in their life. It's such a huge thing, and just so thankful to Srila Prabhupada for that. So going on, just wanting to tell you, the nucleus accumbens is right here. And this is all as a part of this reward pathway system that's there. And so I just want people to remember that, look, you've in the brain, this is the brain, your frontal lobe, and then you've got your parietal lobe, and of course your occipital lobe, but here in the middle you have this cycle. And just remember, this nucleus accumbens is going to be come up as being important in the brain. So there's three areas of focus, which is stroke, addiction, epidemiology, definitions, substances, and stroke. And I'm a stroke doc, so I'm focused on stroke. And Maha-Mantra definitions, and the basal ganglia, MEG study, and the survey that we've done. So we've talked through this. So yogic mantras, Allah, Buddha, Christ, Jehovah, Jesus, Krishna, Yahweh. These are all yogic mantras. They can be used, capitalized upon to imbibe happiness. And especially one thing that I haven't studied, that I probably want to study in the future, is the effect of you can pray for yourself, but there's also this technique of being able to, pray for other things other beings, and that sort of capitalizing on creating happiness, which I haven't done in this study yet, but it's very, very important, because as you send good vibes to others, those good vibes definitely come back to oneself. I'm just not sure if I can say that in a scientific way yet, because I haven't studied that question yet. Okay, so stroke and addiction epidemiology. So basically, substance abuse is common in young adults experiencing a stroke. Patients younger than 55 years old who experience a stroke are routinely screened and counseled against substance abuse. So a lot of this talk is about stroke and addiction and whatnot, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward because to the definitions of addiction. So addiction is basically a primary chronic disease of the brain, reward, motivation, memory, related and related circuitry. And the circuitry I showed you before, and dysfunctions in these circuits leads to biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. Basically, you have opioids and stroke, and these cause stroke. I'm just going to keep going. You have opioids and relapse rates, you have drug addiction, type 1 diabetes, hypertension, and asthma. And oftentimes in drug addiction, we often talk about how there is a relapse rate, but oftentimes this relapse rate is secondary to the fact that we don't have a continuing treatment. And why is there not a continuing treatment is because, number one, it's inaccessible. And as you know, during the pandemic, I'm sure you've heard of it, is that during the pandemic, we've had one of the highest rates of opioid related deaths just last year alone. So it's really an endemic here, and it's really a serious problem in the United States. Then you have the amphetamines class. You have young people using drugs with the amphetamines causing stroke, cocaine. We're just going to go through the drugs. Everybody knows that, sort of drugs, probably not the best. Some do have medical uses, and I'm not talking about the medical uses of marijuana, of course, and the cases of pain with cancer patients. And of course, when you talk about marijuana use in patients with epilepsy, this is not that. This is about addiction, which is the use of a substance to the point where it's actually causing a detriment in your life, and you're not able to stop with that, knowing that detriment, as the definition of addiction. So tobacco, there's really no real great use for tobacco and for smoking. And if people smoke, it causes bad problems. And so we really don't have many medical uses for tobacco. So it's really more of an addiction as far as the nicotine is concerned. And oftentimes people use it as a stimulant for their brain so that they can basically self-medicate for diseases. So going from there, we have the definitions of stroke. We understand stroke. We understand that stroke is basically a disease where either you have a bleed in the brain, we have blood, or you have lack of blood going to certain parts of the brain. So that's the medical side of this. So now going to yoga. So yoga, as far as Webster's is concerned, is a theistic philosophy teaching the suppression of all activity of the body, mind, and in order to understand yoga, you have to really experience it. The dictionary definition really doesn't help. And this is where I'm going to sort of open up the floor, because I don't want this to be just a didactic lecture, because those are super boring to me. I'm going to hopefully call on people and say, Sarvabhauma, what does yoga mean to you? After you have sort of chanted your rounds, what does yoga mean? What does that mean?
One thing, the goal is to experience a self as peaceful and non-changing, even though the material world constantly changes and causes stress. If we contact something that's non-material, and it becomes part of our life after the yoga process or meditation or chanting, and gives us clarity and higher consciousness at all times. I mean, yoga means to connect. So we are spiritual beings, but we are trying to connect usually to material things, and that's a disconnection from our higher self.
Absolutely. And so I think you hit upon it. It's connection. Really, it's that connection. And, there's this incredibly great epiphany that's happened in addiction, is that connection with other people decreases the rate of addiction to substances. And what you're hitting on is also this, is that connection to your higher self may also decrease addiction. And so what did you really, the word yoga is kind of summed up in just that connection. And so absolutely. So the highest form of yoga, bhakti yoga, is thought of as a science of self-realization. Other people have achieved some sort of connection with other things, but just wanting to go through what mantra means. Man meaning mind, tra meaning freedom from. So oftentimes people will use the words mantra. I mean, I've heard so many people in so many meetings use that's the mantra, that's the mantra, that's the mantra. It's a great colloquialism, and it sounds nice, but it's really not a mantra, because none of these things, like for example, we had one patient who was saying over and over again, time and space has reversed itself as a police car hit me, when he came in because of a drug overdose, and he had a hemorrhage in his brain, and took cocaine, and was saying all these things over and over again to sound good, but these aren't things that release oneself. And this is really important. Like, for example, have you played your Atari today? That's back in the Atari generation. I'm not sure what it is with Fortnite, but this is sort of the thought process that you really need to pay attention to, because mantra is not, what mantra is not, is something that encloses you in a thought process. A mantra really frees you to being in a state, exactly as you said, of peace through all the stresses of this world. And it doesn't impose stress on the mind, it actually takes away stress. And so just wanting to go through this thought process of the body, the charioteer, and the senses, because here is a picture that shows sort of the body and the chariot equaling the body, the passenger equaling the soul, the reins equaling the mind. And then of course, you can't see down below here, but sight, smell, and all the senses. And then Krishna, or add in whoever it is that you believe in, Lord Jesus Christ or Allah or whoever it is. This is sort of this intellect that's there, and that superior intellect. And once you have that superior intellect grabbing onto the senses, this is there. So basically, I had an experience with Jayapataka Swami, and this experience was in the hospital. And one thing that I realized, and what really made me want to do this research, is he was sitting there in the middle of a hospital, and I was this is a few years back. And what happened is that there was a situation where he had the carbon dioxide levels in his blood went up to close to 100, which is super high. And he was needing to be intubated. And the anesthesiologist said, look, we can't use anesthesia for him. And his left hand was just doing this the whole time. And it basically was just clicking over and over and over again. And at first I was like, is this a seizure? And then I looked, it's just that he was just chanting over and over again. And through the whole intubative process, he didn't flinch. And I was so taken by that, because most people who have a tube that's being stuck down their throat are really going to have a difficult time. And he wasn't encephalopathic. It means he was there with us. He was conscious, but he was at a level of even keel that I really could not replicate. And I was like, man, what is this? How is he able to harness this power during such a difficult situation? I mean, there's other physicians that are on his team that have experienced much worse, and and he's been able to handle that. And I wanted to understand this very well, is how was he able to sort of control his senses during such a difficult time, which is what the thought process was. And when I discussed this with him, he was like, well, try to study this in the brain. So we have the body, which is the chariot, the passenger, the charioteer, the reins, touch, taste, and smell. And if you don't have that intelligence, which is obviously the mantra itself, then you don't have that. And that's the theory. You don't have that connection of what you were talking about, Sarvabhauma Prabhu. So go ahead, Shirupa.
Sorry.
Okay, good. All right, so once again, yogic mantra meditations, I want to just be clear that we, our thought process, is definitely that there's millions of names that can be taken. The ones that we've just found that are the most efficient for us is, the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra or the Panchatattva mantra meditation. So this is obviously A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who, based upon his ability to harness this energy and his connection, came to the United States in order to bring this knowledge to the United States. And so this is also, this research is based upon other work, obviously, from Dr. David Wolf, who basically started this, and he was able to show in his studies, just in a quick nutshell, is that there's a lot of aberrant behaviors that you can decrease using the Maha-Mantra meditation versus the control group and versus using alternate mantras. So that was where I sort of got very interested in this. So this is MEG, and it's called magnetoencephalography. So it's MEG. It's a technique for localizing basically a different electrical activity within the brain. And you see this is the machine. And you put basically different leads on the brain, and then you measure it. And this is one way where they localize different areas of epilepsy, and then they plan and they plot out different surgeries for patients who have aberrant electrical discharges in the brain. And thereafter, they will plan tactical surgeries around that area to remove those parts of the brain and to keep the areas that are actually useful. So it's used. This is not something that's an esoteric science. It's used, and it's in the same it's in the same family as EEGs, and it's also used along with EEG for surgery, as I've said. So it's based on a B field. And basically, I want to tell you about this because this is what our study is based on how we actually studied patients. So it's based on an actual field that's generated. And once that field is generated, there's a lot of physics here. It picks up on different areas of the brain, and then we measure them and go from there. And so basically, you have a magnetic field again, and that the key point of these slides is not to bore you with esoteric physics, but it's really important for you to know that really this is based in science. And when I was discussing this with Guru Maharaj Jayapataka Swami, he said, look, we have everybody subjectively understands on a level that, look, this feels better. I want you to capture what's going on in the brain, and then move to the actual subjective feel of this. So this is how we brought it. So we took about 18 subjects, and there was a study measuring language, bilinguals for 10 minutes. Then they had a rest state. Then they had where they basically each of these subjects had 10 minutes where they were in a rest state, where they were just staring up at a picture in the wall. And then they would chant for 30 minutes, and then they were in a rest state. Now, this is one thing that I did include in this study, which is the Panchatattva meditation, because oftentimes, as we understand from our experience, it's very easy to try to access the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra meditation if we capitalize upon Panchatattva meditation. So what we would do is have people chant 1 or 2 rounds of the Panchatattva mantra. And then they didn't have to use beads, but as far as counting, and then in order to clear themselves, then move directly onto the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra meditation. And then they would buzz, and they would tell us, after chanting for 30 minutes, they would tell us when they've hit that state. And so that they would have a rest state for 10 minutes, and then they would have chanting for 30 minutes, and then they would have a rest state again. So we would measure the before and the after in our study. So again, before I go into this, I want everybody to know that there is a pathway here used in drug use and drug abuse, and this is the nucleus accumbens right here in the brain. So I'm bringing you back to the first. So this was my first study, the first study that I did. I was the first subject, and this was my brain at rest. And you can see that here is a bunch of activity here in the brain. I'm in the frontal lobe. I was amazed. My wife says that I'm amazed that you had some activity there. And then what happened is that I was able to sort of switch areas to a state where there's not a lot of aberrant activity there. It's quite interesting after I did during my meditation state. And it was able to really harness this and get to a point where it really brought down sort of, if you think of this as activity in the brain, I was really able to do that. So based upon this and based upon my discussions, we went ahead and we were given the opportunity to study about 18 other subjects, with now an ability to, if we want to, even go further than that. But the pandemic has slowed some things down in that area. So here, this was the before state, and this is the after state. So here, if you take a look, here is the brain waves that are taking place here. And if you look here, this is the after state. So sort of a clearing. So this on the left, on your left, is the before state. On the right is the after state. So there's sort of a clearing of energies that's taking place, and a clearing that takes place, and maybe a slowing down even, if you will, that's seen here in the brain. So this shows it a little bit more clearly, where in the frontal lobes of the brain, which is sort of right here, and versus here, which is the meditation state. So this is very interesting, because now what we did is we took 18 subjects and then tested them against each other, against themselves. And we showed that in the 18 subjects, there was definitely not as pronounced as mine, but in most of the 18 subjects, you were able to find a detectable, clinically significant area of reduction in actual brain activity that took place in the frontal lobes. And what does the frontal lobe do? It's the executive center of the brain. It helps you to make decisions. And oftentimes, especially people in our community will say, look, if I don't chant, I'm not sure if people here, and I'm going to stop, if I don't chant, then I don't end up having a good day, or I don't end up having making the best decisions for me. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Guru Bhakti Mataji. Maybe you want to speak about chanting versus in a day when you have clinic versus not. I'm just going to pick on you on maybe if you've had some experiences.
Yeah, I certainly would say that when I chant, I find myself to be more efficient and also more calm. So it's definitely, I think I am more efficient and able to handle things better than if I don't.
Right.
And actually, I may just give this example that my husband always chants in the morning. And even when he was assisting Tamal Krishna Maharaj as his servant, he cannot function if he doesn't chant in some ways. So he did not, my spiritual master did not engage him in the morning. He allowed him the time to chant his rounds so he can do the rest of his day. So that's really pretty amazing.
Thank you. That's a really great story. Thank you for the insight. Appreciate it. I'm going to pick on maybe Indra Devidasi. If you could tell us, I just wanted to go down and understand what people's experiences are with chanting and how it affects your day or whatnot. If somebody wants to chime in, I'd be really thankful. Oh, maybe not there. Okay.
Maybe Brandon has to come in, perhaps.
Brennan?
I can speak if you like.
Oh, perfect.
It's true. But,
oh, sure.
So my experience is similar to like Guru Bhakti Mataji was saying. I feel when I don't chant in the morning, I feel like if I go on my day and I'm late for work, or I have to, put my rounds off a little bit till later in the afternoon, I feel not settled. I feel like I'm off balance all day.
Hmm.
So that's my experience.
It's off balance, absolutely. So it seems like during the night or whatever it is, which is quite amazing, is that usually you'll sleep for rest, and then you'll wake up. And what's interesting is you mentioned this being off balance, and what Guru Bhakti Mata, she said is she feels more efficient. I think, and Sarvabhauma Prabhu was also like, even though he was directly in seva with his Guru Maharaj, the effect of chanting actually made him better at serving, at his service. And I found this an incredible thing. And I think that this is actually what happens physically. I don't know if this is the science behind it, that I won't say, but I can definitely see there's an effect there in the brain that takes place, where there's a decreasing of maybe these aberrant thoughts. We have about 60,000 thoughts that take place per day. And it'd be nice to be able to eliminate some thoughts that are not useful. That's my first thought process. And the second thing that I find that it's very interesting is it possible that our rest, so-called rest, isn't really rest? And is it actual that the true rest is a meditation? That's this. And that's really what's very interesting about what you're saying, is that you're on balance when you're able to do this. And isn't that what sleep is supposed to do for us? It's interesting. So going on, so we have, these are the 18 subjects, and we found a difference. If you look here, here's the blue areas of the frontal lobe, where there's sort of this hyper like intensity. These are MR images, but it's really not supposed to be used that way. And then if you look here, in the areas after the meditation, most people were able to calm down a little bit. Of course, you're in a machine, calm down this area a little bit. But what's more interesting, I find, is this area of the nucleus accumbens is sort of being lifted, is being set up. We notice that right here, where people are actually chanting and using their beads, this area of the brain is lighting up, which is absolutely correct, right here on the right side. And then, but we found this area of nucleus accumbens, which is the same area that lights up in this reward pathway that takes place when you and I have chocolate, when we have drugs, and say there's a drug such as cocaine, there's a spike, but there's a sustained level here that takes place here in the brain, where you have this area of sort of reward that's also there after chanting these names. It's quite interesting. And so maybe that's what Dr. Wolf had picked up on in his study, where when he compared the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra to other mantras, he found that there wasn't as good of an effect by doing that. And maybe that is because we have that connection. Of course, we all think that that's there for sure. But physically in the brain, we're showing that, look, there is an effect here. Of course, this is not a comparison study between a mantra and another mantra. This is Hare Krishna Maha Mantra or Panchayat mantra, and not chanting any mantra. So our conclusions of the study is basically, number one, we were able to have relaxed frontal lobe activity that takes place with Maha-Mantra meditation. There was an increased activity in the area thought to be the reward circuit, which is thought to be down in the nucleus accumbens. And then we're studying more people as time goes on. And then as the pandemic releases, I think we're going to try to get more people in the hospital and go from there. And now, as I write up, I'm now part of the National Stroke Program in the VA. I'm working in order to work with cigarette addiction, and hopefully I'll be able to bring this into the area of suicide, especially for our veterans here in the United States as time goes on. But first, I want to really attack this tobacco addiction, because it's directly related to what I'm doing as far as stroke. So I want to focus there. So we talked about sort of the 3 areas of focus. I've run through the definitions of as far as substances and stroke, focused a little bit on Maha-Mantra, and now meditate definitions. And then now I'm going to go into Maha-Mantra survey and future studies. Does anybody have any questions right now for me?
Hare Krishna, this is Nimai Sundari. Can I have a question?
Dandavat Pranam, of course, yes.
On a simple level, is there something you can tell a difference in the brain function or activity or structure of a person who chants and the person who doesn't chant? In the layman's language, what would that be?
Well, that's a different study. So you're asking, so there's 2 different things that you're asking. The first is structure. So we do not have a study comparing the brain volume of normal controls versus people that chant. We don't have that. That would be an MRI study, and it's a great study. That's number 1. Number 2 is we do know is that there's a different areas of activation or deactivation in the brain secondary to the Maha-Mantra and to Panchayat Mantra. We know that there's definitely different areas, and we feel that the areas of deactivation are in the frontal lobe and the areas of activation are in the reward circuit. Does that make sense? So to put it really simply, no to structure, because I don't know of any study that has actually studied structure. Yes to our study as far as brain activation versus deactivation. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat. Maybe I frame it differently.
Okay.
If you have 2 individuals to look at activation, or if that's what is known, and tell that a person who does not meditate or chant at all from the person who regularly chants or meditates, can you look at the whichever way and tell the difference?
I don't know.
The reason I'm asking this, because somewhere down the line, I don't remember where, somebody had said, a saintly person, that, oh, this is not for me, because of so many years of meditation, my nervous system is all differently plugged or differently done. So that was established as a fact. And that made me think, okay, if I chant, a person I'm trying to convince to chant, I was saying, you know what? Your brain thinks will be different. You will be wired differently. Was it make sense?
Well, okay, so there's this idea of synaptic plasticity that you're speaking of. So what the synaptic plasticity says is, say I move this area of my thumb, and I keep doing this with my finger like this over and over and over and over again. And I keep doing this for 5 minutes a day. That area in my brain is going to increase, and then cortical thickness. There's also going to be more energy, and that pathway to the brain is going to be thickened. The same pathway, it's the same way that would happen is if you're doing the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra or you're doing the Panchayat Mantra, that area will be enhanced. An example that I can tell you of, I can't tell you I studied the brain, is one story I heard of one patient who with Alzheimer's disease, who was given the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra, and that's what she did remember. So there was that pathway that was formed, and usually that's set in the orbital frontal lobe. And so that area of her brain was accessible for her, and she was able to continue to chant even in the midst of Alzheimer's disease. So to answer your question, Mataji, we don't have definitive understanding, which would be done in an fMRI study, of what the actual pathways are. But it's a great study to think about. And number two is that, yes, your brain is going to be rewired towards the activities that you do, and they're going to favor those activities that you do. The question is going back to the sannyasi who said, I don't want to do this anymore because, or this person who says, I don't want to do this anymore because of this, there may be just because I doubt there may be some other things that are going out around there that I'm not able to put my finger on. But as far as it being detrimental, I don't think that's actually the case that I found, especially from our surveys.
So I'm not wired differently if I chant a lot.
You may be, well, if you may be wired differently, but more emphatically in the areas that require chanting. In that way, but I can't tell you that there's actual increased cortical thickness or whatnot. We do know in other meditation studies, they have found different pathways that do form secondary to meditations. Yes, and we know that from University of Wisconsin studies.
All right. I was just trying to gain some points for my convincing.
Yeah, I think the key as far as convincing is concerned is that there is definitely a difference that is noted in the brain that's meditative versus a brain that's not. And that is definitely there. And as far as Maha-Mantra chanting is that there's that, the thing that we know is that there's different areas of the brain that will light up that are within the reward pathway that will make you feel good. So this thought process of chant and be happy, really, truly, yeah. Chant and be happy. True.
It's true. I'm making it true.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Because chant and be happy. How are you being happy? Maybe you're releasing some chemicals in the brain that do make you happy, and you're lighting up those happy pathways.
Thank you. That's good.
Go ahead, Guru Bhakti Mataji has her hand up.
Yeah, I was the areas which activate and which deactivate. How long does that last? Did you have a study?
We couldn't.
And
we
then
could,
do they?
Yeah. Go ahead. We couldn't.
And the
we
other
couldn't.
thing is,
go ahead.
do they stack up? Like, you know, you chant today, and like people who do it over time, do we see that there's a stacking up? Or
These are great questions. I wish we didn't have the funding to actually continue and check over an hour because these machines, each one of these scans cost something like $4,000, $5,000. So we didn't have the funding to actually do that. But once we're able to do that, I think it'd be wonderful. It's a great question. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go on. So this is the Maha-Mantra survey in decreasing anxiety, depression. What I'm going to do is I'll show you that, you know, we've had an ongoing survey for a few years now. And this is 225. So this is not really updated. I think we have something about 450 now, but the results are close to the same. Where we've asked about different areas of Maha-Mantra meditation and what actually has been taking place. And I'm going to get past the areas of the heart attack and whatnot. And these are really questions to help us to study more. But what we found really here is we found that most people feel that in the areas of brain power. So as life goes on, there's areas of the brain that you feel and emotions that you feel that are not helpful in the success of you achieving your goals. And I really want to bring this to where people feel that, do you feel this meditation has or continues to help you with any of the following emotion? I feel like this is probably the most important slide. Now, previously, as far as my development as a physician, I felt that this is actually probably not the most important slide because I didn't feel that I felt like the actual effect on the addiction is the most important slide. But I'm actually starting to feel differently because I feel that if you're able to control your emotions, then you're able to control the outcomes during a stressful situation that would cause you to want to that drives you to certain behaviors. And so I think that this is probably the most important slide here, because most people feel that there's at least a 70% effect that they feel this meditation has directly on, anger, lust, greed, depression, sadness, loneliness, anxiety, and helplessness, which are sort of all the negative emotions that are there. And as far as the effect and how much they feel, there's a significant amount of effect that we have with how much this helps with anger, how much this helps with feelings of desires that are sort of unwanted, that aren't helpful. And then also at the same time, in sort of this greedy thought process, and basically allowing you to be sort of at peace. And then what was amazing here is, do you believe this meditation helps you with depression? 80 to 99%. So, this is where it brings me back to that area or that time when I had met with Philip Seymour Hopkins. And I remember that, when he was talking, I was so amazed by what he had accomplished in his life that I really didn't talk much. I was just listening. But I feel that that's actually a disservice, a major disservice to him, because I could have just taken a few minutes and just been like, look, there's only a few things that I really know as a med student. And one of those things that I know is the Panchayat Mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra, and just say it. And that, this could probably help you. And I felt that at that time, especially, I was a medical student, a pre-med student at the time. So I really didn't have the development both medically, nor did I have the development in my spiritual life at that time to where I could do it. But that's where I feel that we can make our biggest impact as far as patients are concerned is, look, just a simple phrase, even Nitai Gorango, can really change your life if repeated over and over and over again. And I think that this is very serious because, we have such a serious suicide problem here in the United States because of the inability to remove maybe thoughts or emotions that aren't helpful to us. Same thing with sadness, depression, obviously hand in hand, but wanted to make sure. And then loneliness. They say 1 out of every 3 people who are elderly in this world have a feeling of loneliness that takes place. And this is one of the most amazing things that I'm hearing, because when you interview our community is very, very content and sitting and just reading the Bhagavatam throughout the day, and and the feelings of loneliness don't come because of exactly what Sarvabhauma Prabhu mentioned, which is this feeling of connection that's there. So people are mentioning, that these great sort of movements forward, and oh wow, people who aren't addicted have great connections. These are sort of these obvious things that sort of are known within this Vedic culture that need to come out. So these things that are sort of taught from day one of this connection, and that your major connection to yourself is actually the fundamental of going on through life. These things are missing, and when these fundamentals are missing, I feel like this leads to these massive epidemics that are there. So anxiety being another thing is, how do you deal with anxiety? And Panchatattva Mantra meditation is an incredible way to deal with it. Whatnot. I'd really love to study the I forget, it's the Ugram Vida Mahavishnu mantra for the Nrsimha mantra. I'm not sure what the actual mantra is called, but I'd really love to study Nrsimha mantras up against anxiety. And so sort of tobacco smoking, heroin addiction, cocaine addiction, alcohol addiction, tea, coffee addiction, all of these things are there where people have said that they really feel that these have really helped with the following substances. So given this, my focus is directly on tobacco addiction. And I felt like this was one of the most important slide of, close to 80 to 90 people who felt that they're no longer smoking. And what was really interesting is there was a 40 to 59% effect in patients who say, like, look, there was 100% benefit. Even if I didn't continue to chant, I was able to stop smoking with using the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra and that behavior. So it didn't come back, and there wasn't a relapse from that by simply chanting and ending it there. So that was really interesting as far as smoking cessation is concerned. Are there any questions? So this was here. There's 100% benefit is I'm no longer addicted to smoking tobacco. And there's, of course, 1 billion smokers in the world. So I feel like this is a really good place, especially for people who are smoking or have a nicotine addiction, because nicotine sort of affects these areas where these nicotinic receptors in the brain, in the frontal lobe. And that sort of is what ends up stimulating that area. And interestingly enough, that mantra, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, seems to have a big effect here in the frontal lobe also. So basically, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. There's also a 100% benefit with heroin addiction, but I think we only had something like 8 patients at this, or 9 patients who felt like there was a very solid benefit to heroin addiction. And of course, heroin is a big issue. And in addition to that, we have the opioid pills. I don't think cocaine is such a big issue. Alcohol is, but I think the biggest 2 areas that I think I'll be working on, especially trying to work on the VA, is tobacco addiction and depression. It's because we do have a large population that does feel depression and has suicidal ideation. Go ahead, Sarvabhauma Prabhu, you have your hand up. I can't hear if you're speaking.
Prabhuji's talking on mute, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, yes. When I was in Australia, I met a devotee at the Melbourne Govinda's restaurant who taught meditation. He had a card at the tables of the restaurant about if you want to learn meditation. And I don't know if he did any studies like you're doing, but he would, for some people that had traumas and physical abuse and things like that, he would teach them the Nishinga mantra, and he would give the Maha Mantra to other people. And I heard that he had some success. People were benefited. I think one area where maybe there would be funding, we have quite a problem we have the idea that chanting helps us come off the bodily platform. And there's a lot of racism and attention in the society about people of different physical races having discrimination and conflict. And I think that would be interesting to do sort of an inner city study of the effect of chanting Hare Krishna on, racial prejudice, and, I believe it would reduce. And I think there might be funding for that because it's such a hot button issue these days.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a great thought process. How do you inculcate that sort of resilience and redirection of focus for those people that are maybe victims in this area, and then also a redirection of thought process for those people that are the sort of oppressors in this area. And I think it's very interesting as far as how can you use this in our society today. Certainly there would be massive help for these movements. I agree. I'm not sure how you could study it though in a controlled social setting. But I agree that it'd be a great, I think it would be a great help because usually people that are so involved in this are more involved in how to enhance the art and the connection, because once you've gotten that taste, you don't want to stop. that taste or that connection, and anything that sort of tries to come in the way of that is looked upon as an inferior thought. So how do you distribute that? That's great. Mr. Reddy, or I think two people have their hands up. Madhav, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Prabhu, I have a question. Like, does meditation without chanting and with chanting have a difference in any way on the brain?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like,
I'm just not sure what the exact, because meditation in of itself, there's different sorts of meditations, right?
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's different degrees of in different areas. Some meditation is thought of as simply just trying to not think of anything. Some meditation is thought of as just trying to think of water. But it's very difficult to have a connection with water.
Right.
So the thought process is I think my question in this is, what is it about the connection between our community and the Maha-Mantra and our community and the Panchayat Mantra, and being able to have a connection with that, because it's said that the names are non-different than the actual form, that actually affects our population to decrease their use of addictive substances. I think it's just been a replacement because that connection is there, and that just expounds upon the thoughts that people are having. That connection decreases addiction. Your thought is saying, what is the difference between this meditation, which is the Hare Krishna Maha-Mantra meditation, and just simply meditating upon maybe a form and not using any words and not using language, or just focusing on some inanimate object? Like, for example, we have what apps do we have out there? I think it's Calm.
Yeah, that's
You
one.
know, so I think what you're saying is that, is there a study of working on the Calm app? And I think they are studying with the universities, the Calm, how Calm is affecting people's brains, and how Headspace are affecting people's brains. I think that's definitely, that research is out there and it's coming.
Feels like mantra meditation superior in any way?
I don't know the answer. I can't tell you that this meditation is superior than that, because I haven't done the head-to-head comparison. But it's a really good question. I don't think that we're there yet to doing a randomized controlled clinical trial of one meditation versus another in a mass scale.
Yeah, I think the uses of different mantras for like different purposes, like Gayatri mantra, like you were mentioning the Nrsimha Dev mantra,
Mhm.
like
a
how
good
they
question.
affect us. Yeah, I think that would be great studies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I can say that I believe more studies have gone on silent meditation type techniques, both Buddhist and transcendental meditation, things like that.
Right.
So there's probably more data on those types of. There probably is a need for more empirical studies of the Maha-Mantra chanting.
Right. There's Gopinath Prabhu. He's done a study at the VA in Colorado, where he's studied patients and the effect of on the vagal nerve, and the effect of I think heart rate variability, and the actual use of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and the decrease of heart rate variability. That's a pretty big deal if you look at it, because it shows you know, of what the structures of the heart and what happens in the heart when you're actually chanting. So it's quite an impressive group. I think it's a group of 12 to 15 patients, but it definitely showed that there was decreased heart rate variability that takes place there. So would love to expound on that. And I think to your point, Mr. Reddy, I think that that would be a great comparison, because you could actually study what the difference is between different techniques, such as, you know, silent meditation, Buddhist meditation on the actual heart. And I think that, you know, brain is obviously, because I'm a neurologist, I'm biased to the brain, but you know, any physician or anybody that could study the heart that'd be really interesting also.
I think it'd be nice if some donors would, support more research.
Mm. No, absolutely. So here are my mentors, Dr. Hugo Moser, who I started off 20 years ago at the Kennedy Krieger Institute in Johns Hopkins Hospital, Dan Miller, and Dr. Katramatos, who really helped me to move forward on this. Both of them really were super supportive of this at Henry Ford Hospital, and went from there. So special thanks to them. And of course, Susan Bauer at Henry Ford Hospital, who was very, very important with Dr. Zilgett at giving us the resources. It costs a lot of money to do these studies, so they really helped us to fund this and to allow us to use the machinery without causing any difficulty to our pockets. So with that, I really appreciate you inviting me to speak, and thank you.
Prabhu, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So in the beginning, you spoke about how connection with other people decreases addiction. Have you noticed any similarities or differences with the Maha-Mantra as opposed to connection with people decreasing addiction?
Well, it's a really good point, right? It needs to be the right people that you're connected to as far as the addiction that's concerned, and the right associations. We know that the right associations will decrease addiction to different processes. And we know that also in meditative spaces also. I had, what was it, 15 minutes of non-direct association with the Krishna Goswami. And, I would smoke cigarettes during my residency, and it stopped the next day. So that's how I knew that. I was like, something is there. So I had a good association just through video. So, it just stopped, instantaneously. I started the next morning at 16 rounds, I think. And then I was like, oh, I don't need this anymore. And I haven't ever since. And I was like, wow, one day I'll study this, not now. And then as time went on, I don't know how I became, a stroke physician, but strokes and cigarette smoking are pretty synonymous. So stopping smoking would be good to do. So to answer your question, I think that connection, it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, in my experience, and from what I'm hearing from patients, that connection doesn't have to be just with another person. It has to be with another person that's qualified, I think, to help you. So it's a good question.
This was fascinating, and we can't wait to hear what new findings you discover in the future. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions or comments or appreciations and would like to unmute, please feel free to do so.
I would just like to add that Yogeshwar Prabhu was interviewed, I think, by Chaitanya Charan on his podcast. And Yogeshwar was saying that although Srila Prabhupada, was critical of some aspects of science, he wasn't against science. When science is used in a progressive way for spiritual and material benefit, he pointed out that Prabhupada was, would appreciate science if it's used constructively in an enlightened way.
Right. I agree. I think that there's, I think we learned from Tamal Krishna Goswami that the use of science and the use of education, modern education, and this is actually, they're non-competitive. I think he went on to university at the age of 40. Is that correct? And completed a PhD at the age of 40 to these things. So I think it's really important to educate ourselves in whatever modalities we have to study these things in a more objective way. So I think that's really important.
Tamal Krishna was closer to in his 50 when he.
It's unbelievable. 50s, really, wow. I mean, starting anything in your 40s is difficult. I can't imagine 50s. right? And going through and completing a PhD at the age of 50 is phenomenal. So what is that energy that allows him to do that? Whereas people starting things at 50, it's very difficult. What's the energy that allows Srila Prabhupada at the age of 70 to do this, whereas other people have difficult from going from one room to another at the age of 70, whereas he traveled around the world. So
One last thing from me. Can you just comment briefly? I mean, Jayapataka Maharaj is quite an amazing resilience from all his physical problems. Can you just briefly just add something else about Jayapataka Maharaj's tremendous tenacity for continuing his preaching and activities despite so many physical setbacks?
oh geez, I can go on and on about the observations I've made for hours on end, but I would agree that resilience that's there within the mind and within the heart is definitely, I feel, mantra based. I don't feel like there's a time that I've seen that he's not, chanting away. Even during the night, I've observed even in the middle of hospital, where he's continually chanting. So I think that buildup or that residual strength that takes place. And I think Neelam Mataji had mentioned it, is that have my pathways changed? I believe that his pathways are so large. If I just break it down to a non-spiritual level and just say on a material level, I feel like those nerves that are in the brain that do that chanting are so big and so well nourished, and that they're continually firing, and it's serving him to go through all the way so that he doesn't have to experience the material world as we would experience it, or as I would experience it. Not you, of course, because I know you're on a very, very similar level, but where you're experiencing a much different reality than what people perceive you to be experiencing. So, of course, it's what areas of the brain are activated, what areas are deactivated. They say 80% of our receptors in the sensory lobe are more pain receptors, where you feel a lot more pain than you do pleasure. So in order to calm those receptions of pain, what practices allow you to go through and overcome those things, so it's not a difficult time. So I feel that constant immersion in bhakti yoga, or the connection, is probably what builds his resilience. And I mean, having been through multiple surgeries, having been through multiple difficulties, but also at the same time going forward every single day, for me as a neurologist, I think that was the biggest reason why I definitely wanted him as my teacher, because I'm more convinced by that situation than I am by somebody who just says, this will help you. I don't have to listen to a speech. I can see it on a daily basis. So I'm more convinced as a neurologist.
And you spent time in Mayapur with
Yes.
with Maharaj.
Yes, I had the chance to be a fly on the wall with Maharaj, and it was definitely one of the most phenomenal experiences of my life. I don't think that the actual experience, don't get me wrong, Mayapur I feel is great, but the actual experience of Mayapur was so significant for me as the experience of watching him conduct 18-hour, 19-hour days on a daily basis, even through all the pandemic, is where he's going through and talking and discussing and conducting meetings. And me asking him, I have a pretty full schedule, but his schedule was worse than my schedule. And I was wondering, how is he able to do this on a daily basis? How are you able to speak? I'm speaking on one speaking engagement after work, which is sort of a 7-hour, 8-hour day for me, but his days will go out to 18 hours, 19 hours continuously, and for days on end. And we'll have to ask him to please take days off. So it's very interesting how it's just nonstop. But I feel like, to your point, it's that resilience, that energy that just drives him through.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
I think Ananteshwar Prabhu had his hand raised. I don't know if it's still there. He put it down from Hemalata Ayurveda.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, no, I'm the Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, go ahead, Ananteshwar Prabhu. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhu, for this wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciated last time also when you given during the doctor seminar.
Oh, thank
we
you.
have.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sorry if it was a little bit repetitive, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add to your points that mantras do help a lot in recovering the physical body also. In Ayurveda, there is a specific study for that. We call it there's a chikitsa, Daiva Viparsa chikitsa, we call it. In which,
Chikitsa, okay.
in that, there are different mantras which have been given for different kind of diseases. And there are different mantras which have been given for different organs of the body. For example, if we have, if someone is having a severe problem with the stomach issues, we tell them to chant the Ram Raksha Stotram. And it's clinically, it's proven that, patients do recover quickly. But since, and there are some mantras in which they have been told to chant the Vishnu Sahasranam. And in that case also, the results are very positive.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe it. I believe it that there's definitely an effect of these vibrations on different areas of the body. There's no doubt, because if you're feeling a physical manifestation of joy in your heart and all of these joys are all there has to be a chemical reaction that actually leads to that joy, right? In the physical body. So the question is what is that, and is that having a positive effect on other cellular interactions? Yes. And I don't think it would be too far of a leap to go from there. I agree.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, bro.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have one more question.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
What about listening to mantras versus like chanting the mantras themselves? Like, any difference?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. So yes, if you can't chant, like, can you be able to listen to the mantras, and do you have it on all the time? I find it to be phenomenally relaxing. I don't know if we've asked that question, but we certainly, it would be a great thing to do. I just have one case. I remember one of my friends' grandmothers had the Guillain-Barré syndrome while I was in medical school, and it just came to me that maybe we should use this Trayambakam Yajamahe Shivji Maha-Mantra, because she was a great, I think she was a Shivji devotee, and it was really helpful for her for healing and whatnot. So and she obviously couldn't chant throughout, and she had it on. During the study, we only had them actually actively chanting, and it would be a great study to figure out if you could just listen and see if we could decrease smoking from there. So I will definitely think about that. Is that how can you? I think your question is very good, because you're saying, look, not everybody can chant at that same rate or whatnot. Is it possible, if they listen to it, that could be an effective therapy in of itself? It's really a good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if you could use the Panchatattva mantra just to listen to constantly, and then and if that would have the effect of decreasing tobacco use simply by listening. And that would be better, right? Because then you could say they listened for 15 minutes and this was the effect on their smoking, rather than they've had a subjective variance in different people, and that would be the effect on smoking.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, bro.
Thank you.
I would like you to just share with the group about Go Run Go.
Oh, okay.
I think you mentioned it, but I don't think you elaborate on it.
Okay, so go run go, Nitai go run go, obviously. So Nitai is obviously Nityananda Prabhu, and go run go is, I mean, if you look, it's go run ga. But oftentimes in Mayapur, the way people will pronounce it is Gorango, especially amongst Bengalis. So we use Gorango for our patients. I use Go Run Go for my patients all the time in hospitals, where we're doing a stroke exam. I'll have them repeat, and I'll say, "Hey, just say Go Run Go for me," and I'll give them this as a mantra. It's a good American mantra too. The way sort of this came up was, I thought about this. I was thinking, with Guru Maharaj, I was like, how is it possible to deliver this without delivering it? And these are sort of some methods that came up, is that, look, it doesn't matter if they know or if people know what the meaning behind this is, because they will find the meaning. The key is just to get them started, and automatically the mantra itself will find their way into their lives at a critical point. And so oftentimes with my patients, I don't think there's almost, at this point, there's no patient that goes on without saying go run go, unless they're encephalopathic, or at least they'll hear it. So that's basically the thought, is how do you, I think Guru Bhakti Mataji is saying, just even if they say the name once, knowingly or unknowingly, maybe there's an effect. Brennan? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brennan.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Haribo.
So I think that it's more, I think with the Maha-Mantra, and I am a neophyte, that it's multifactorial, right? I mean, you get out of bed and, I recognize myself. I then realize that it's God's time. It's not my time, right? Even though I'm the beneficiary of it, I invariably take my little Tulsi plant. I take a canvas. I light a candle behind it, and suddenly that image on the canvas, which is Krishna, comes alive. And even the flickering of the light makes it look, and then to be able to say the Maha-Mantra. But then something interesting happens. When I'm finished, I then realize that that there is this continuing communication with Krishna, and it's in deeds, right? So then I go to work. I work in for a nursing home, and so all I feel on some level has happened is that the method of communication has changed. It was in the morning in terms of the Maha-Mantra, and now it's in deeds in terms of seva. So in a way, I think those folks that are so like so many on this call, right? I think that they're continually speaking to Krishna, but just in a different action, in a different way.
No, absolutely. Once you're connected, right? And so once you've reignited that connection, you're connected. And then when you're disconnected also, and your body lets you know. I think that you're absolutely right, is that there's different forms of communication is what you're getting at. And I mean, one is through verbal, the other, I think there's different levels of that connection that are there. And I agree with you that when your actions are aligned with the actual mantra itself, it's very helpful to enhance that. And I think that there's a cycle there, is what you're getting at. I think people notice this, is that once your actions are aligned, the actual reciprocation of the actual chanting itself and the meditation itself intensifies. And if there's something that's out of, like, for example, if I was to yell at Guru Bhakti Mataji right now and just say, I can't believe you called me to this thing, why am I here, blah, blah, blah. My chanting and that connection, because I've had a poor interaction with somebody else, that actually will decrease my actual level. And I think that it's talked about very, very significantly, especially in Gaudiya Vaishnava literature, that your connection with other people and the respect that you offer to other people and how you interact with other people is so important in how you interact with your higher self. I think you're absolutely right, Brennan. Right. And as well as if I try to come off, even if it's not as sincere, but I make an effort, it's recognized and it's reciprocated the next morning in my meditation. So I use Guru Bhakti Mataji as just an example of say we have a good interaction and say I have a respectful interaction, it will really help in my actual meditation the next morning.
I think like that's why we meditate on the Shikshashtakam, I think, kind of like to get the right mood.
Fair enough. Absolutely. It's true. Those 8 verses are pretty phenomenal. And it seems so simplistic. And the problem is it seems it's so easy to take for granted the power of one good person's association. And that's what I realized just through life, is that every moment counts, and the things that we take for granted really don't, really could make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. If we just offer the best of who we are to those people. Thank you for bringing that up, Brennan.
Prabhu, I love how you brought that back full circle to the actors that you spoke about in the beginning, that you met and you had those opportunities for interaction. And and it's something that's now in your mind that you're mindful of as you move through your interactions with other people. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. This has been wonderful and enlightening.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me some time. I would love to learn from you also. I've learned so much here already.
We would love to have you back, especially as your research unfolds.
Oh, please pray that we're able to do it in the VA and full scale and decrease smoking and hopefully that's the outcome. But let's see. Let's see.
I'm sure you could get some volunteers here as well.
Absolutely. Would love as much help as possible.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shri Rupa.
Actually.